Right, let's talk about it. The Peugeot Citroen PureTech engine. Every single month without fail, I get several messages from individuals who have gone out and bought a car with this engine only to be stung by a massive repair bill. So if this video helps at least one person out there, it was worthwhile making. So we'll get into what the problems actually are, as well as how you can go about getting them resolved if you've already taken the plunge and own one of these engines. Let's get into it. So the PureTech engine appeared in 2012. Now the whole intent behind it was a new age, high efficiency, low emission engine that would replace the aging ones which were currently being used in small cars. It originally arrived with a 1 litre and a 1.2. The 1 litres were actually quite rare. They were only fitted to the very earliest of 208s. So it's the 1.2 you're mostly going to find on the market nowadays. That's the one that we're going to focus on in this video. And remember as well, it wasn't just used in Citroens and Peugeots, it was used in a whole host of cars, including Vauxhalls. I'll add a full list in the description below for you to check out after this video. So what is the issue with these engines then? Well, grab a brew for this one. There's two main problems. Number one is that it uses a wet timing belt, very similar to the Ford 1 litre EcoBoost engine, also a notoriously unreliable engine by the way. For those of you not familiar with that term, the way that a wet belt is set up is the timing belt actually feeds through the engine oil. A horrible design. I cannot for the life of me fathom who ever thought this was a good idea. Probably someone with planned obsolescence in mind. So it kind of goes without saying, hot oil and rubber are not a good combination. The belt starts to degrade and fall to bits. It deposits little bits of rubber, little rubber particles into the oil, which are then fed around the engine, often causing catastrophic damage. And what we often see in the engine autopsy is that the oil pickup becomes blocked, so the engine dies as a result of oil starvation. Earlier engines are said to be worse for this, and the manufacturer did make changes to the belt over the years. We started off with a smooth black belt, which then changed to a texture almost like denim, and I think it since went back to a smooth belt once again. There's no definitive dates, by the way. The manufacturers are quite hush-hush on when these changes were done, but the main takeaway is, doesn't really make any difference. They all crack, they all deposit rubber particles into the oil. Now, one advantage these engines do have over the EcoBoost is we can physically see the belt. It's real simple. Remove the oil filler cap, shine in with a torch, and you're going to be able to see the belt sat at the top of the engine. Any cracking on it whatsoever, and that engine ideally needs the sump taken off, that belt replaced, and a good thorough clean and inspection is going to be required there. Main dealers have also got a tool which they can insert and measure the distortion of the belt, but by account of a friend of mine who's a master tech, they barely ever use that tool. A visual inspection is usually all that's required to condemn an engine. Now, one thing I'd like to add here is you almost always get people who tell you, so long as you take it to the main dealers, so long as you use the right oil, so long as you service it on time, it's going to be 100% fine. Now, I don't know if these are maybe owners trying to make themselves feel better about the purchase of this engine, but in my experience, it's not the case. I've seen cars firsthand that have been very well serviced, main dealers, correct oil used, suffer a similar fate, unfortunately. My answer to this is, why would you want to take the risk, even if there is a chance that they would remain 100% reliable if you service them on time, correct oil and so on? Why would you take the risk? Because if we pick a random alternative, the 1.3 that's found in the Honda Jazz, you could probably run that thing for 10 years without a service and it would be 100% fine. My point here isn't to go off and buy a Honda Jazz and never service it. My point is there's far more reliable alternatives available. Go for one of them. Now, if you do happen to be unlucky enough to have one of these engines currently in your possession and it's gone wrong or is in the process of going wrong, here's a little piece of information that might just help you out. So main dealers are going to be aware of something known as special coverage. Essentially, the manufacturer issued a notice to dealers to tell them, look, we know these wet belts are flawed, so if there is a problem with it, we're going to cover it. Obviously, they're going to hold you to servicing schedules and you're going to need to meet certain criteria, main dealer servicing and such. But even if the car is out of warranty, they should still cover it. So absolutely fight your corner if that's your case. Now, if you have had one of these cars or currently have one of them, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how you're getting on and if the manufacturer has covered it in the end for you. Now, I did say there was two issues with this engine, and for the purposes of This video being comprehensive, I'm going to mention the second one. You probably don't need any more reason to not buy one of these engines. The wet belt should be enough for you. But this second problem is oil consumption. As soon as you start looking into this engine, you're probably going to see it all over. Now, the official stat is 1 litre per 4,000 miles is okay. Still a little bit high in my estimation. For an engine which is that small, it shouldn't really be using that amount. But often they do tend to even exceed that. And those engines that are exceeding that, usually the problem pertains to worn piston rings. And these piston rings seem to wear out really, really quickly. For those of you not mechanically minded, worn piston rings, it usually means good night to the engine as well. Now, the bottom line is, just don't buy a car that's got one of these engines fitted. Save yourself the pain. I believe they're a culmination of two things. Number one is back in 2011, 2012, this is when emissions regulations were really starting to ramp up. Manufacturers were trying to find ways to meet them. So they were using turbos, they were using smaller engines, they were using lighter components. That, coupled with the fact that they were still trying to turn a profit and maintain a healthy bottom line, it's not a good combination. We end up with things like this PureTech engine. Thankfully, however, there are a lot of good alternatives out there, and when you do find one of those, here's another little tip. Use vehiclescore.co.uk. This is a free service. It'll tell you the good and bad points about any car that you're looking to buy. If you are serious about buying it, purchase one of their paid HPI reports. I'll add a 15% discount voucher in the description below to help out with that. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Avoid the PureTech, and I'll see you next time.